Hello, my name's Jesse Alton. My friends call me Mr. Metaverse, and I'm starting a show. It's going to be about the metaverse and interoperability. And we're going to call it the Metaverse Interop Show, and this is the first episode. It's the Metaverse Interop Show. How was that? All right, so what can you expect from the Metaverse Interop Show? Well, there's going to be 6 main topics that we cover in our time together. Number 1 is there's only one metaverse. We'll talk about what that means and how we all fit in. Number 2, interoperability. So let's talk about what interop is, why you should care, how you can benefit from open protocols, and of course, how you can get involved and give back. Number 3, product management and iteration best practices. So we're going to talk about this because this is what I know. I've had the privilege in the last 10 years of working with dozens of founders and growth stage businesses. I've worked everywhere from business development to product management, and I love what I do. Thing is, not only is product and strategy what I know, but it's something I know can make an impact on the metaverse. So we'll talk about those best practices and how you can incorporate them in your metaverse project. Number 4, we'll talk about builder tools, communities, and resources that are out there. There are so many metaverse builders out there that are happy to share their knowledge with you so long as you're willing to put in the work. So we'll talk about what that looks like and how you can get started. Number 5, metaverse investment signals and exemplars. So the one thing that I've been focused on is converting Angel, our incubator, from a incubator of open source projects like OMI to a full-fledged incubator that has funds for metaverse founders who leverage and contribute towards open standards of interoperability. So by and large, I believe that we need to drive more investment into metaverse interoperability. And frankly, I believe that there is tremendous profitability in metaverse interoperability. And so we will regularly discuss why and what you should look for as an investor. Number 6, metaverse news, guest speakers, and features. So I may have mentioned, I actually am one of the founders of OMI, the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, which is a collective of different metaverse builders, platforms, some for-profit, some not-for-profit, some use blockchain, some hate blockchain, but at the end of the day, we've all come together to co-create these protocols to make metaverse interoperability possible. So consequently, I have the privilege of rubbing elbows with a lot of different metaverse builders, and they share updates every single week. So we'll take a look at some of these massive headlines, things that you may have missed, and we'll even do a deep dive, sometimes with the builders there, showing what went into building what they made. So what is the metaverse? Well, I've avoided this as long as I could. See, when we first set out, it was kind of a powder keg to even put out a definition. I've been working towards the metaverse for 10 years, and there are dozens of people who have been working on this even longer. So when I set out, I avoided the temptation to define the metaverse because I didn't want to send the wrong message that I am so bold or so egotistical that I felt I could define this thing. Well, the dust is settled, and I'm thankful that I was aligned with some of the definitions that my colleagues have fought for and worked really hard for over the last 20 years. And I feel pretty confident that I can answer the question. So the metaverse is the digital equivalent of our universe. It is all things digital. If you are familiar with Tony Parisi's 7 rules of the metaverse, I think Tony really captured what a lot of us believe the metaverse to be. And so let's take a look at the 7 rules here. I'll be sure to drop this article in the comments below, but I really love the way that Tony summarized the definition. So first things first, there's only one, and I'll repeat it, one metaverse. There are not multiple metaverses. I know it can be a little bit confusing because you hear companies like Microsoft say that multiple platforms that they own are already metaverses. You're seeing companies like Niantic claiming to be building the real world metaverse. These are all companies that have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to continue down the path that they've already gone down. A lot of folks don't want to admit that they don't know. So they set out, who else but Microsoft should define the metaverse? See, the thing is, it was already defined. And when Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook decided to really push hard on their metaverse effort, it was good in that it raised a ton of awareness for this word, but it was bad in that many folks genuinely believed that Facebook are the only ones building the metaverse. And consequently, this counterculture emerged of people building their own platforms, claiming to be building their own metaverse. See, when we choose to work together and co-create and understand that we're all part of the metaverse, your life gets a lot simpler. There's only one. So that's rule number one. Rule number two, the metaverse is for everyone. I like to say that it can be for anyone. That's my only tweak here, because not everyone is going to want to be part of the metaverse, and you should have the right to opt out. If you want to live in Montana and you want to live off the grid and you don't want to be required to have some type of metaverse presence or a headset or an AR enabled device to be able to live your life, that should be totally within your right. So rule number two calls out a pretty important point, that we don't want to force the metaverse on anybody. So rule number three, nobody controls the metaverse. It's simply impossible for one company to build it. And the same goes for interoperability, which we're going to talk about a lot, right? Like the protocols that are getting co-created at groups like OMI and groups like MSF, the Metaverse Standards Forum, there's a reason why these companies and builders have chose to come together to co-create. And that is that it's way easier, right, when we choose to co-create these protocols and adopt them and test and share what we've learned, than it is to kind of go down this repeat path of previous protocol wars, where it's the Microsoft standard for avatars, but here's the Apple standard for avatars, and here's the Epic Games standard for avatars. It's going to get pretty old if you have to collect various headsets just to be able to experience the metaverse. Realistically, what we want to see is that you can experience the metaverse even without a headset, with the smartphone in your pocket, or even just the browser, and that you can have almost as rich of an experience as those who have high-tech gear. So nobody can control it, even though a lot of companies are going to try. In the long run, I think it'll become more and more evident, and we're seeing it with groups like MSF, where it's like something like almost 2,000 companies, if not more, have pledged to use these open collaborative standards because it simplifies our lives across the board. So rule number four, the metaverse is open. The metaverse is not supposed to be open. It's not that it must be open. It's not that we hope it's open. The metaverse is open by default. Therefore, the walled gardens, the closed systems, these ecosystems that are building that force you to build within their platform or on their SDK, the grants that are out there for builders and entrepreneurs that, they'll give you, let's say $100,000 if you build inside of their ecosystem. These are predefined tracks for you. You're not building the metaverse. You're building in the metaverse, and particularly you're building within a platform that's in the metaverse. So if the metaverse is open, these closed systems are still part of the metaverse. That's something people get confused about. They're very much part of it. I mean, PDFs, MP3s, anything digital is part of the metaverse. What matters most here is that the road, the glue, the connecty bits that make the metaverse possible are open by default and not closed by default. Rule number five. The metaverse is hardware independent. This is kind of echoing some of the topics that I just discussed, but again, no, if the headset company that let's say you're using a particular headset and all of their content is exclusives and their content doesn't work on other headsets, really look deeper into that. Apple's about to get into the field, and they're probably like they are definitely the world's favorite walled garden. People are raving fans about Apple and don't quite realize that this system, this closed system, this walled off system is very much the antithesis of what over 2,000 companies have pledged to use in the form of open interoperable standards. So you're going to see Apple's model get challenged, but you're also going to see a ton, like millions of people become metaverse developers overnight. as soon as Apple gets into the space. Just like when the App Store was officially ratified by Apple and it was no longer something you had to jailbreak your phone for, it was like overnight, millions of people became app developers. So there's this coming wave of new metaverse builders, and I really hope that we can drill this in, that building in a closed system where you can only access it on that one headset, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself, to your end users, and definitely to your investors. So we'll talk about this a lot. Rule number 6, the metaverse is a network. This is directly related to interoperability. There's no shame in building a platform, right? Like, just say you're building a platform. You're not building a metaverse, you're building a metaverse platform. Just as cool. It's totally acceptable to use that term. But what matters is that your platform is able to be connected to, in some capacity, to the rest of the metaverse. So really think about that, about how it's a network. And we're going to talk a lot about interoperability, or the ability to take, say, a phone or a 3D object of a phone and have it work in one world, but then it'll work again in another world, even though they're owned by different parent companies. Or your avatar, if you want to be able to stay your avatar and step through a portal that goes from a Facebook-owned system or Meta-owned system, and it lets you go into an Epic Games-owned system. This is very much a future that we're going to be able to experience in this lifetime, and that's very much because of rule number 6. Rule number 7. The metaverse is the internet. This is kind of a cheeky one, but it's totally, it's an important rule. The reason is that oftentimes when we describe the metaverse, especially when we work through these first 6 rules, folks will say, oh, isn't that just the internet? Yes, the internet is totally part of the metaverse. It is the digital equivalent of our universe. So let's talk about some things like what the metaverse is not. So when folks talk to me about the metaverse, they're like, oh, does that mean you're a blockchain guy? Well, I am a fan of blockchain, but I'm not a die-hard blockchain person. Blockchain is part of the metaverse. It is not the metaverse. So for folks who hate blockchain and pretend like it doesn't exist, you are also only operating within part of the metaverse. This is maybe this is a hot take, but if you're building an experience and you're deliberately building features to exclude blockchain, you really should look inward, because I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So for the folks who are die-hard blockchainers and for the folks who are so anti-blockchainers, what I've worked hard on in the last few years is trying to get these groups to try to see eye to eye on the things that we share in common. What we don't want to see is a blockchain metaverse and a non-blockchain metaverse, right? And the same goes for open source versus proprietary, right? You've got folks that work in public that build things for public good. Everything they do is open source. Maybe they are exited founders and they give back in this way. Maybe they just don't believe in making money, or maybe they have a job where they make enough money and they're able to do this. But working in public is good for the world, but in many ways being able to sustainably work in public is a luxury that we should acknowledge. So for folks who work in the for-profit sector, they're building part of the metaverse too, and we really shouldn't shame these people who are building proprietary systems. We really want to empower the builder to make educated decisions to, again, build for the metaverse rather than competing to be the origin of it. One here is that some of the work that you're going to see in this show is going to be blockchain based, and other times it'll be completely void of all blockchain. But by and large, for the most part, it's all part of the metaverse. So if those 6 topics sound like something that you'd be interested in, please go ahead and smash that subscribe button below, hit like, and leave some love in the comments. I think I have 1 follower right now, and that follower is me. So let's see what kind of impact we can make, and let's build the metaverse together. It's the Metaverse Interop Show. How was that?